Afternoon, Advanced Consult Group. It's been a little while. We have been very busy though, and that's why. So apologies, but also we've been doing a lot of stakeholder engagement. So I'm sure a lot of you have been involved with that. Some housekeeping items. Number one, the call is being recorded. Number two, the purpose of this call is for the CBO to collaborate with the experts in the state and get your feedback on what's working, what's not working, and hear your ideas of what we should be doing different and or better. So please, anything that you can contribute is welcomed and encouraged. We want to hear from you. And with that, we'll jump into the agenda. I'm going to kick things off by talking about where we're at with BEAD and what's going on there. And then we'll jump into workforce and talk about some new things coming up with the cell phone committee. Okay, so BEAD. We've been very, very busy. The portal is open. We've got lots of activity going on in our grants portal. People are poking around, working on their applications, and so far, for the most part, everything is going very smooth. For being a new system, we've had very little issues. So that's great news. And in that effort, there's been all kinds of stakeholder engagement, which we'll jump into here in a moment. But I wanted to talk about kind of like, how we're going to do this, fiber versus alternate technologies. I know there's been a lot of questions and confusion around some of that. So I'm hoping that we can clarify some of that today and also get some feedback from you all on what your feelings are, thoughts are on some of this. So first off, universal coverage. We're not going to get there by using just fiber. We'd like to. Fiber is ideal, but that's just not the answer to every location, as I know most of you understand. So we're going to work with everyone and anyone on creative and strategic solutions that will get us connected in the most difficult or to the most difficult locations. And with that means that we have no choice but to take into consideration non-fiber technologies. In that effort comes the need for fairness and transparency throughout this entire program. Like I said, we've been very, very engaged in stakeholder engagement. We've got our office hours every Monday at 2 p.m. We have a FAQ, frequently asked questions document that we are updating on a daily basis that further clarifies and clears up confusion. Lots of hot topics on there: satellite, high cost, all of that stuff, which we're going to talk more about here in a moment. As a reminder, the application window closes on October 28th at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Any questions about any of this before we start talking about costly areas? And I did see a comment. What just came in here? Cable has plans to get to 25 gig. Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate that link. We'll definitely look into that.
Yep. Just announced at the Cable Tech Expo this week.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's talk about high cost categories. This has definitely created a lot of confusion. So we wanted to clarify what these categories are, because when we talk about high cost, it's easy to kind of blend it all in together as like high cost or extremely high cost. And I mean, even me at first, when I was learning about this, I thought it was all the same thing, and it's definitely not. So let's go over the categories. Number one, there is what the NTIA is defining as a high cost area to serve. These are unserved areas where the cost to build broadband service is higher than the rest of the country's average. That's their definition. Then we've got the CBO's definition of high cost broadband serviceable locations, also known as BSLs. We are asking applicants to designate BSLs on their application. This would be where it's relatively costly to serve with fiber compared to some of the other locations. So that's different than what the NTIA is defining it as. And then we've got the third category, extremely high cost per location threshold. This is where the CBO can approve the use of non-fiber technologies, also known as alternate technologies or alternative technologies, including fixed wireless and potentially technologies not considered a reliable broadband service by the NTIA. That would be satellite and or unlicensed fixed wireless. And as we've mentioned all along on these calls, we will set the extremely high cost threshold after we receive all of the applications and kind of get a feel for where the market is at. Any questions about those three categories? Wonderful. Let's move on. Let's talk about how the NTIA prioritizes BEAD and the technologies. Sandra, you've got your hand up. Before we dig in, let's hear from you.
Yeah, my question is that does that decrease or modify the 93 to, I think it was 7% of fiber to wireless? Do those numbers change with this?
I'm sorry, repeat what were the percentages?
So I asked the broadband office a couple of months ago, what would be the ratio to the fiber to wireless build out, even in the high cost areas? And it was like 93 to 7% or something like that. Does that change?
I don't know that we've officially defined that, Judd, or anybody else on the call. I don't think we have. I think the intent here is to serve as many as possible with fiber, but a lot of this will be dependent on what applicants propose. Yes, Laura.
I was going to say 93%, Sandra, that's our current coverage in terms of number of locations in Colorado that have what we deem as reliable broadband. So I don't know if you're thinking about that, with that 93% number, but that's our current coverage number. But yeah, Jonas, I don't think to find a fiber to wireless.
Well, and then the other number, as far as how much we're trying to get to be fiber, some of our models are as high as 96, 97% would be fiber, but it depends on where you set the extremely high cost per location threshold, because then you can do non-fiber, but we're going to have to set that somewhere because we're not going to get to 100 for sure. But it's most of the models are, yeah, 95, 96, 97%.
Okay.
That's probably what you're referencing. Thanks, Jed.
Okay.
Is that helpful, Sandra? Does that answer your question? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, let's talk about NTIA priorities for BEAD. Again, fiber first. That's what we're shooting for. Second would be other reliable broadband technologies. So this could be coax or licensed fixed wireless. And then the third would be alternative technologies like unlicensed fixed wireless and low Earth orbit, also referenced as LEO, which is satellite. So go for fiber, then look for any kind of cable or licensed fixed wireless. And then if that's not available, we will explore unlicensed fixed wireless and LEO providers. Questions? Okay, let's keep moving. What is unlicensed fixed wireless? How are we defining that, Judd?
Might have stepped away.
Yeah. I don't know the official definition off the top of my head, but Sandra will look that up and get back to you here momentarily. Or at least
it's just officially the public frequencies that fixed wireless can run in that are available to anyone. That a number of commercial providers provide fixed wireless. You don't need to get any kind of licensing for it whatsoever. It's just like the 5 gigahertz range, 2.4 gigahertz. There's several that fall up to that. That's general fixed unlicensed fixed wireless, but it presents issues with interference since anybody can jump onto it.
Yeah, that's the main demark there is you don't have to have a license from the FCC.
Perfect.
And it's subject to interference.
Right. Which is why it's unreliable.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're talking about reliable versus unreliable, fiber again, always number one. Fiber's king. Other reliable technologies, again, cable modem, coax, DSL is now considered a reliable technology. I think that's new by the NTIA. And then we've got fixed wireless technology utilizing an entirely licensed spectrum or a hybrid of licensed and unlicensed. Ralph, go ahead.
I guess this is NTIA's definition, but I wasn't aware that DSL actually met the 100 by 20 requirement, but that's, I guess, neither here nor there. But
yeah, and you know what? It may not in certain markets. Like, you know, maybe here Lumen in Colorado is unable to provide those types of speeds, but maybe in other markets they are. I don't know. But yeah, I do know that that was added recently.
It would have to be really short loop lines.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe right next to a mid node in some places. I think the upstream is really what kind of knocks them off usually. They don't seem, it's very asynchronous in most implementations, so you can't really do much uplink.
Yeah, Jeff.
Hey, Jonas, and forgive me if you're about to cover what I'm about to ask. You mentioned that maybe the DSL definition is new in the latest NTIA guidance. I did get a question from one of my members about to ask you what else is new in the most recent guidance and how that is changing your approach. And I may just have asked the question that is the entire point of your presentation, but I wanted to be specific about it.
Well, I think there's some new guidance coming out or expected from the NTIA around LEOs. So I think that that's probably going to have an impact that's undetermined at this point because we're still kind of waiting to hear what that guidance is going to be. That's really the only major, new guidance that we've received. Judd, can you think of anything else that maybe I'm not thinking of?
Well, I was just going to clarify. We were able to do this in our mapping exercise in volume 1 under BEAD. The CBO defined DSL as not reliable. And so it is not accepted as a reliable technology under the BEAD program. And we had the flexibility to do that. States could define DSL as not reliable. So just clarifying on that, the DSL issue. For the reasons that we were just talking about.
Yeah. No, that's great clarification. Thank you, Judd.
Thank you.
And Jeff, I would suggest also maybe submit that as an FAQ, and that's something we can dig into a little bit more as a team and provide maybe a more thorough answer. And then this slide just goes into more detail about these alternate technology. We don't necessarily have to get into all of them and the ins and outs and technical aspects of it, but it just kind of breaks it down again. When we're talking about the two kinds of satellite, you've got GEO satellite and you've got LEO satellite. Your LEO satellites, that's going to be like your Starlink, low Earth orbit satellite, unlicensed fixed wireless. So when we talk about unlicensed fixed wireless, it's a type of fixed terrestrial wireless service that uses unlicensed spectrum to provide internet service to a location. So that kind of piggybacks on to Sandra's earlier question. Okay, let's keep moving. So if you go to our FAQ document, a lot of this is covered in these sections here. 10.1, basically most of that section 10, section 11, 14, and 16, you're going to find a lot of detail around questions that are around high cost and alternate technologies. And then Lauren, thank you for putting a link to that document in the chat.
And I just want to make sure too for the group, I can't remember if we've discussed this, but our FAQ document that I just dropped in the chat is how the broadband office is answering essentially any question we get from stakeholders, whether it come through email during office hours, a direct email to a staff member, again, to try to be as fair and transparent as possible. We want everyone to be able to have access to the information. So that document's become fairly long for that exact reason. So, but it's available on our website. And again, if there's anything that you're just wondering about the Colorado BEAD grant program, the answer is likely in there. And if it's not, it'll probably show up soon. But I'll drop in the email address as well. You guys can always let us know what questions you have, but that's where we seem to be filtering a lot of the information for the FAQ is through our advanced email. So I'll put that in the chat too.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, what's next? The workforce grant. So I'm really proud of the work that our team has been doing on workforce. And for those of you who don't know, if we haven't talked about it before, which I'm sure we have several times now, there is a huge need to expand the broadband workforce in Colorado, as well as the whole country, to support all of the projects that we are expecting over the next several years. And so we've got this workforce development group that we've been growing for really a year now, and it has really taken off in the last several months as Michael Murphy from our team and Delia Sanchez have really spearheaded those efforts and put together an incredible tiger team of industry folks, higher education folks, tribal folks, really union folks, everyone to come together and start developing ideas and solutions for how we're going to build up the workforce to support the projects that we are expecting. In that effort, we just applied, actually, I think we're applying to, if it's not today, it's definitely tomorrow, for an EDA grant. This is a grant that will help fund education and internships for the telecom industry. So this will be, it's going to happen in 14 rural counties that are defined by the EDA as high poverty or possible high poverty. And this will fund the opportunity for 40 new fiber optic technicians, 50 outside plant technicians for specifically trenching and boring, and 40 locators that are in conjunction with Colorado 811 locating services. And so we're really excited about this. I think we've got a very high potential that we will be awarded. I think we're going after close to $7 million that will help fund the curriculums and training programs that will support these job opportunities. So more to come around that. But again, many thanks and kudos to the team for making this happen. It's been one hell of an effort. As you all know, applying for any grant is a lot of work. It's tedious. It requires a high level of skills and expertise from all over. And the team was able to pull that together from throughout the community to make this happen. Eric, Region 9 is doing a lot with Michael and Delia. Sorry, I just lost my chat here. Ralph, specifically Emily Lashbrook here in Archuleta County. Yes, I think that anything that you have to support Michael and Delia's efforts with workforce, please get connected with them. They would love your support. And Region 9 is really in a fantastic area of the state that could, I think, benefit from that. And I believe some of the positions and one of the training pilots we're looking at is going to be in the southwest area of the state to help support those needs. So please get in touch with Michael and Delia. And then Ralph, you said, I would be interested in helping on the workforce development. How do I get connected? Reach out to Michael Murphy and or Delia, and Lauren will put their email address in the chat. And I would just reach out to them, let them know that you want to get connected and help out. We can use all the help we can get. Thank you, Ralph. Okay. So any questions or other questions, comments about workforce in general or this grant? Great. Well, joining us now is Michael McReynolds, one of our legislative liaisons, who is a close partner to the CBO. And he is going to talk about some updates we have around cell phone connectivity here in the state and some things that the CBO is contemplating in supporting those efforts. So, Michael, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Jonas. My timing couldn't have been that good. I apologize.
Right
I literally was jumping from one meeting to the next, and that was the entrance. So, yeah, we're on to something. No, thanks for having me, and nice to see a lot of familiar faces here today. Couple just interim legislative updates wanted to share with this group, and happy to take any questions folks may have, either here or outside of this forum, obviously. So. An interim committee of the legislature formed and has been meeting throughout this summer and into the fall was the Cell Phone Connectivity Committee. This committee was formed out of intention to have a group to discuss cellular connectivity issues and some gaps across the state of Colorado. The committee consists of a number of industry stakeholders and some other folks. It also includes 4 different legislators. In short, just that interim committee does have bill drafting authority, and they've met a number of different times at this point. The last time they met, which was just this past early part of or end of August and early part of September, they did vote to draft a number of legislative bills to consider. They'll next be meeting, just to be clear, next Tuesday, October 1st, to vote on whether to introduce some of the bill concepts that they had voted to draft. There are a couple bills that we wanted to talk and just share with you all about that impacts the Colorado Broadband Office. One bill in particular relates to this committee's interest, and quite frankly, a lot of time that they spent was talking about the role of the state and what the role of the state should be, what it could be, what it is, what it isn't. And this first bill that they're establishing has 2 sections. One deals with emergency contacts and just clarifies some communications with the Department of Public Safety and Homeland Security and Emergency Management. That's in section 1. The title of this bill, just to back up for 1 second, will be called Single Point of Contact for Wireless, I believe, is the short title that we've seen so far working. Section 1 deals with that emergency contact piece, dealing with DHSEM, does not have really a direct broadband impact per se there, but Section 2 would. Section 2 of that bill essentially does a number of things. It takes wireless and sprinkles it into the some of the existing sections of statute of the Colorado Broadband Office. Again, just to back up a moment, the committee had talked about what is the right role for the state, recognizing that there wasn't really an office in the state government that is the sole focal point or single point of contact for either industry or even constituents or local governments to contact for any type of assistance or information or anything related to wireless. And so their first thought was maybe there should be a role for the state to play here, and what should that role look like, and who should it be with? And the first thought is to sprinkle in some of these responsibilities into the Colorado Broadband Office's statutes, recognizing that there is some connected tissue there just from a telecommunications sense to the broadband industry. Just to share with this group as well, right now we are in a neutral position and are sharing that with the committee members as well as the legislators on that committee. And really we're fine with what they've drafted and what we've seen so far in that bill draft. We think it tactfully sprinkles in wireless into some areas of our statute that make a lot of sense. And when I say make a lot of sense, it's the mapping components, it's some of the strategic strategies, it's clearinghouse type of information roles where the state can play to help local governments get connected, to help facilitate those public-private partnerships better, playing a very much similar role that we've seen the Broadband Office play in the broadband industry, solving a lot of the same problems that the state's asked to solve in broadband. Could really interested and focused in that wireless space, knowing specifically where those gaps might be. So a lot of the same symptoms and problems that we've positioned the Broadband Office to help partner with and solve for the state. The same could be said for wireless, and we think there is something to be said for that connected tissue. And for that reason, we're okay with the notion of what they're suggesting. So happy to take any questions on that bill. But before I do, I'll talk about the other bill that impacts our office. and that is an incentive component. So the committee, in short, was, hey, we need to create some sort of state entity to take some presence here and provide some assistance potentially. The second conversation was what types of incentives could be offered to the wireless sector to further close the gaps that are apparent across our state in that space as well. The concerning factor, or the concerning thing we've seen, I think, just to share, is we've seen a draft bill that would make dramatic and frankly drastic changes to the high cost support mechanism and the broadband grant program that we're working to relaunch, frankly, from the passage of House Bill 1336 last year still. For those that might remember, House Bill 1336 last year sunsetted the Broadband Deployment Board, directed us to reestablish that as a broadband office run grant program by the end of this calendar year, and we're working towards that. We're actually getting close to entering a public comment period here this fall, where we're going to be soliciting information on the grant criteria, the grant program itself, and what that'll look like. And so the bill that they're proposing that we've seen so far seems to make drastic changes there, and it would segment into a completely separate wireless grant program using that high cost support mechanism funding. And so we are opposed to that if that is in fact the bill that they're going to be considering next week. And again, happy to take questions that folks might have on that bill. The last thing I'll say before I open up on just the questions here from that committee update is they're considering two other bills that our office does not have positions on. One involves local permitting for some FCC regulations and a shot clock, particularly in some of the telecommunications space that may or may not be of interest to some folks on this call. But we do not have an active position on that local permitting bill that they're considering. And then a fourth bill that I've actually yet to see myself in draft form is supposedly supposed to deal or address some solutions to theft reduction of wireless communication materials, copper wire, fiber, things like that. I think materials that are used in wireless infrastructure, they're trying to figure out if there's mechanisms to put in place to reduce or deter theft. So those are the four bills that committee is going to be considering and expect them to take up and talk about next week. And again, happy to take any questions for folks if they have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns around what the bills mean. Ultimately, there is a process with these interim bills. When they vote on them, if that committee votes to introduce the bill will be one of the first introduced bills when the legislative session goes to convene in January. It doesn't mean that it's automatically going to pass just because it passes next Tuesday. It simply means that it'll be teed up for introduction and further debate during the session next year as well. So yeah, looks like Jeff, you might have a question. Go for it.
Hey, Michael, thanks for the summary. A question and then just a couple of comments I wanted to share. On the incentive bill, can you tell from the way it's drafted whether the money that's supposed to be allocated to unserved wireless comes out of which bucket from 1336? Is it the 60% middle mile bucket? Is it the 40% other permitted uses bucket, or is it creating a third bucket entirely?
The way we've read it, and I know Paige is on and she's analyzed this as well, so I welcome Paige's thoughts. The way we've analyzed this is that it would basically wipe what we've created in 1336 just off the table, and it directs us to create two grant programs, one for broadband and one for wireless. Paige, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts or if you've had another look at that and want to weigh in.
Yeah, I think it's keeping the two programs separate, so it wouldn't be taking from that 60%, 40%. It's just splitting the 5%.
Okay. Regarding our positions on these two bills, just as a heads up, we'll be planning to let the committee members know either later today or tomorrow that we also have concerns with bill number 2, that incentive bill, and bill number 3, the permitting bill. We're not opposed to the concepts. Obviously, we think permitting reform is a great idea, but the way it is fleshed out in these two bills, we think really violate two of the central tenets that we've been really good about adhering to when structuring broadband programs in Colorado. One is technology neutrality, and also not duplicating using scarce government resources.
Chair, I think Jeff froze. Jeff, are you with us?
Yeah, I lost him too.
Okay, maybe he'll hop back on. Okay, well, maybe we'll see if there's other questions. Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess you said that maybe the CBO is being asked to participate besides, your position that you're taking on these bills with regards to cellular, since there's some crossover. Is that just because of there's no one else to do it within the state, as far as like a department that really, I mean, I know it kind of falls into an area that's it's largely piecemeal, and it's been satisfied by commercial build outs that have been completely on their own. I mean, this with reference to the cellular coverage areas by just commercial interests. And so there's obviously gaps, which probably isn't your biggest area with, the other focuses you have right now. But I'm just wondering if there's the crossover you're thinking of with the CBO could be on the fiber backhaul in the middle mile that usually the cellular providers want when there's a new tower going up. If that's some of the cooperation that's being asked of the CBO to kind of look at that from that standpoint. Is it the data component of the cellular that is part of it today, where there's, fixed wireless FWA customers that come off of cellular? I mean, what is the CBO being asked to do with relation to, filling in the gaps of cellular deployment?
Yeah, it's a great question, Eric. I think I can. I want to be careful to provide an answer that speculates a little bit, but also just admits that, like, I think one of the problems that we heard from the committee and from the legislators is that, to your first point, there is no entity, right, for folks to go to, and there's admittedly some similarities in the work that we do for the broadband space to their goals or hopes for some of this wireless space, right? Fostering those, again, I mentioned fostering the partnerships, but and I think that's why they sort of took this approach of looking strategically, at the statute that we have, where, just to give you an example, right, in one of our sections of statutes, it directs the broadband office to reduce barriers to deployment and adoption, utilization of broadband, and then the bill would add an and wireless, including consideration of affordable broadband and wireless service. So I think it's trying to build upon strategies that we know have worked in broadband and allowing our office to just make clear that either they're included in those efforts and then expand upon just that data functionality and closing some of the information gaps that we have to better understand where decisions even need to be made, whether that be, public partnerships or even further activity from the state eventually. I do want to just make one thing clear. I think our office, again, being neutral on this bill, one of the key considerations is that we very much want to make sure that there's no, how do I want to say this, that there's no misinterpretation here that we are wanting to open the door, take the eye off of broadband being our number one priority from an office. Like, broadband is our office. We are not making this the Colorado Broadband Office, or this bill wouldn't make us the Colorado Broadband and Wireless Office. And we're very conscious of that, because this is, we're viewing this as complementary. There's work that we're doing that could be transferred over and probably have some impact in wireless. And we're not trying to create sort of a giant separate division of our office to, spend equal amount of time on both of these specific sectors in the telecom space, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if that helps, Eric. I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the connection points that you mentioned there, maybe, and talk through that. I think we just want to be sure that folks understand that we don't want to become the office of wireless, whatever. We do want to maintain our position and leadership in this broadband space, and not have any confusion around that. So.
Paige dropped the link to the drafts of the cell phone bill drafts on the cell phone committee's website. So you can, if you haven't seen that, you can click on that. I'll drop it in the notes too.
Looks like Jeff is back too.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff. You look like you froze up on us in the middle there. So sorry about that.
Yeah, every time I try to talk on one of these calls, that happens. So we're going to be running a bill next year that requires CBO to regulate and enforce interoperability standards between Macintosh and Google Meets. And we're going to cash fund it by imposing fees on Google or Apple. I don't know. Just kidding. I won't go into my entire rant again. I will share, though, Michael, with you and Paige, the concerns that we send to the committee members about bills number 2 and 3, and look forward to talking to you more about that.
Oh yeah, appreciate that, Jeff. And yeah, for that goes for everybody else too. We're happy to take additional time with anybody who has an interest in this conversation, and we'll be tracking information going into the committee hearing next week. So definitely happy to engage, and feel free to reach out at your convenience.
Will do. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Michael. Really good information and exciting times ahead of us. Any other questions for Michael?
Well, before I drop, Jonas, the last thing I'll just say too, and this is, I think just generally a takeaway that we have sort of, come away with from this interim committee on cell phone connectivity is that they did seem to struggle around what they truly cared about. Right? We have two different technologies here where the lines have been blurred in that sense of broadband can make VoIP calls in this day and age, as well as wireless being able to connect to the broader internet. And so they did struggle, frankly, from my just outside view here of making that connection and having some true understanding. They did make progress on that, but that was something that I noticed. And then, I think our perspective, I think from our office too, is that it's wise to start somewhere before jumping into how to solve problems. And so, right, the committee has a number of bills here. One seems like it's a first step approach of establishing some role somewhere within the state to continue a conversation. And then the others seem to sort of jump, in our opinion, a little bit ahead to try to solve problems. And I always just, I think we take the lens of making sure that we have a good understanding of where and what to do before we start making, pretty serious decisions, either around financial implications or other things. And so that's something that we'll be sharing with the committee members as well as, we're okay and fine with the approach of establishing CBO, some very limited roles, and making sure that this connected tissue and telecom, stays connected. But that we really don't know, frankly, what the right solutions are for wireless. Like it's impossible for us to say today what the right grant program or what the right incentive or what the right this, that, or the other is, because we just don't know. We don't have staff in our office that have been focused specifically on those problems. And so it's hard for us to talk about those next steps, if that makes sense. So thanks again for having me, and happy to take, again, folks' questions if they have anything additional outside of this call.
Well said, Michael. Thank you again. Appreciate your time today. Sandra, you've got a question for Jeff.
Yeah, just wanted to know if there were any community groups or consumer advocate groups involved in your draft or your stakeholding with the bill that you may potentially sponsor.
Sandra, that was a total joke. I'm not running a bill.
Wait, who is it? Who was it talking about a bill to text Google or Apple or something?
That was me, Sandra. I was completely
joking. I'm sorry.
I was just trying to make a obviously not very funny joke about the fact that I cannot do Google Meets on my Apple iMac.
Okay, sorry about that. But Eric.
I have similar issues, Jeff, so it's not just...
So maybe it's not a bad idea.
Got a coalition now.
Okay, so
Yeah, Carrie, go ahead.
I have a broader question, not necessarily related to any of the things we've talked about today, but I don't know if now is the appropriate time to ask.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just a quick question. So I know that you all have sent out kind of the notice that the Broadband Deployment Board has sunset. You guys sent that out a couple of weeks ago. Two questions on that. One, I know as part of the legislation where that Broadband Deployment Board was sunset, you all had talked about creating some type of advisory committee to help, deploy future grant programs since there is no longer this board. So I just wanted to see where you all were at with that, from a process perspective, what that was going to look like as this board goes away. And then the second question, in the note that you all sent out on the Broadband Deployment Board fund sunsetting and the Broadband Deployment Board website going away, you guys stated that you'd be removing the board materials, past applications, award information from that Broadband Deployment Board page. And so I was just wondering, I think that goes away on October 1st. And so I'm just wondering where all of that information will be housed, if it'll be, you guys are going to move that over, or if that's just going away altogether. My members were just a little concerned that they wouldn't have a place to go back and find that material once it goes away. So just those were two quick questions. I guess not really quick questions, sorry.
Yeah, those are good questions. Let me see what I can
Jonas, I can answer the materials question.
Oh, great. That's the only one I didn't really know about.
Oh, great, good team. So Carrie, yeah, you're right. October 1st, you will see the broadband deployment information be removed from the website. But we are, first of all, you can request anything from Broadband Deployment Board from past to the advanced inbox, and that information is coming. So you will be able to email and say, I would like this information. We also still have info that we need to post from past awards or awards that, just received funding from recent cycles. So the advanced webpage is going to now house a lot of that information. And so we're going to create a new subsection of the advanced Colorado Broadband webpage that will have past Broadband Deployment Board materials. And we'll also talk about how you can request them. So more to come on that. But in the meantime, I will at least give you the email and the information where you can request anything. But just know that you will still be able to access things. And some stuff will still be available online, but I don't have specifics yet. So hopefully that's enough information.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think from my members' perspective at least, being able to access that information and readily access it is really important to them. I understand that, the Broadband Deployment Board is going away, but there's been a lot of work and, things that are still outstanding as a result. So I would just, maybe a suggestion or kind of a thought from us is, being able to request it via email is one thing, but having it readily available is also pretty important to us. But that is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Is there specific information that you want readily available? Like, can you give materials? Like what kind of?
I can go back and ask them if there are specifics. Honestly, my members would like access to everything they can. That's the simple answer, but I can ask if there's specifics that, they think that you should all keep on the website.
Yeah, that would be actually really good for us to know. And to be honest, some of it has to come down because of our new accessibility requirements, like the new bill that passed that requires everything on our site to be accessible. So a big reason is we're removing a lot of it instead of redoing all that to make accessible, and then no one ever looks at it, so that's why I ask if you have specific types of materials, then we can look at actually making all those available. We just have to make them accessible. That's all.
Okay, perfect. I will follow up with you on that.
Thank you. And then that other part of the question, I'm so sorry. I just completely forgot what it was. Jonas, do you remember?
Yeah, so she was asking about where we are with, BDB 2.0 and what's the status, right, Carrie? So I can tell you that Brian Martin is leading that effort. Lauren, are we allowed to talk about the new brand?
We can tease it a little and just say we have a new tier of the advanced grant program. So Carrie, that's where the new program is going. So we have advanced BEAD, we had advanced CPF, and now we'll have a new one called advanced state and local dollars.
Yeah.
But you know, I think Michael alluded to it. We will be releasing the guidelines and stuff for public comment soon. I think late fall is our kind of our estimated time frame, but that'll be that announcement along with the guidelines and the public comment will be coming later in the fall. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and just I can jump to, and yeah, our expectations is solicit public comment, work through the guidelines, work through the grant program processes, and relaunch that program. We don't want to waste folks' time, frankly, as well. And so we're not expecting to have that stakeholder work group that's required by statute formulated until the first, after the first of the year. We want to launch the program itself and then have that group start to establish itself and meet. Again, expecting that the program itself wouldn't be making any type of grant awards until the mid to latter part of next year. So in short, there'll be plenty of time. And I think we're working through some more of the clarity of the processes of what the recruitment will look like and just the ability to join Carrie. So definitely more information to come, but that's sort of for sure the timeline of when that we're expecting that group to formulate.
Okay, thank you.
What else? Mr. Hiddle?
I put a link in the chat a little bit earlier. Can't see the chat anymore because, like Jeff, my Mac completely froze up because of Google and I had to switch to my iPhone. But there is a link in the study about the extremely high cost threshold. And it was interesting in that that graph, as you see it, as you get closer to the right, as far as like the number of fiber deployments that they were assuming would be made at that different cost level, it kind of looks like a hockey stick as it gets to the end. So it makes it really hard to know if it's vertical, where on that almost vertical line, you're going to draw the line. And it also mentions that a lot of states were typically going to wait till after the applications to set that threshold. My guess is you'll get something close to the inflection point, which is about $20,000 a passing. But we'll have to see, where that comes as far as like where the fiber no longer makes sense to do as a per passing deployment.
I think that's pretty accurate analysis, Eric. Thank you for that. Agree. Ralph, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where it's going to be, the easy stuff is easy, the hard stuff is hard. Right. So yeah, the how you figure out how you're going to allocate funding and what technologies are going to be the really, really hard parts are going to be on the right hand of that curve. And that's where it starts to go vertical, and you can have enormous costs, particularly for fiber. And so I think you're going to face a couple of challenges. One is nobody's going to bid. So you'll have areas where you're not going to be able to serve because no one's bidding. And then you'll have others where you're going to have to make this hard decision of what's the threshold and figure out, okay, how much more coverage does that give you, and what technologies are possible? So I think, the left-hand side is easy and a lot of that's already built, but the right-hand side is where the real challenges are. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for the CBO, is how to wrestle with that particular side of the curve.
Yes, Sandra.
So all those locations where the ISPs defaulted on in Colorado, is there a workaround for BEAD money to cover those locations that will still be underserved?
Currently, there is no workaround. They are not eligible for BEAD.
In some states like Louisiana, they have a workaround. I was just wondering what Colorado was doing.
Currently, we don't have a workaround. Yeah, it's we're hoping there may be a solution. More to come. Hey, oh, and Michael, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Hey, Ralph, I'm curious, going back to the high cost, what do you think the impact will be, and Eric as well, or anyone on the call? How do you see the impact of LEO providers?
Well, that would again sort of be your option of last resort, right? And those are expensive services to the end user. And the cost for, last time I checked, Starlink was over $100 a month, and then it was $500 for the equipment. So yeah, that's going to be hard. And again, the operational cost, the ongoing operational cost, is something that you're not going to allocate BEAD funds to. So there needs to be, again, some sort of cost subsidy for those locations, because it's unless and until there's additional providers, or the cost of that service comes down, I think it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I think even, and this is what you're kind of finding with the license by rule fixed wireless solutions, how far that gets you to expand your service territory past the kind of de facto extremely high cost threshold remains to be seen. It's not really going to be that big, though, because I think we've mentioned it in previous meetings. A lot of those areas are not reachable by fixed wireless any more than they are by fiber. And if you have to do multiple relays of licensed microwave to get to just a few houses and operationally run those, somebody's going to be like, there's no business case there to run a microwave and a fixed wireless for just a few houses as far as the long-term operational costs. So I don't think, I think that's why low Earth orbit is becoming such a topic when they're looking at the project area maps for those really hard to hit locations. And I did attend one of the office hours a week ago or so, and it was pretty dominated by a lot of that questions from the operators of like, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, they're a private company, the only one that's really in full operation as far as low Earth orbit satellite providers. So and they don't really, I haven't heard, unless you've got some new information that you alluded to, that the NTIA has with low Earth orbit, that there's any kind of partnership arrangements, that their direct sales is what they do. So that makes it difficult, even though that's kind of the way we operate down here in Western Colorado, that there's a few locations that, you just look at them and you say it's going to have to be that solution for you, because there's really no other viable one that is going to be practical, even with some of the funding that's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, good points, Eric. There's still a lot of unknowns that's real curious to understand further and see how it plays out. Nathan, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yeah, it was just briefly. It was around the extreme high cost threshold, and just the challenge that I know on our side, as we look at and our members look at things, is not knowing the high cost threshold and trying to define it ourselves. Certainly, if that high cost threshold ends up being a little different, it impacts the matching funds, that 25%, and what the real viability of the overall project is, depending on how many of those extreme high cost threshold premises are being incorporated into a project. And not knowing, it being hard to define that on our end, and it may be defined for us later, that it impacts that ROI on those properties, depending on if we do have to bring fiber to them or not. And that matching fund for those really expensive areas gets high fast.
I think the cost is what the cost is, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know, I think what we're looking for is we want your most accurate and competitive bid for that location, and then that helps us determine where to go from there.
Agreed.
Wouldn't the match still be a limiting factor, though? That, I mean, at the very least, the ISP is going to know we have to put up this amount, even if the grant is going to cover the rest of it for that location. So even at the 20K per passing level, you're looking at $5,000 per passing, and that's way over what the usual costs that ISPs are willing to bear for putting it in. And that's not going to be covered anymore. That's what they're expected to put up as their match. So I think, I mean, I can't see it going above that much for any ISP saying we're willing to shoulder more of it on our own without any kind of subsidy going much over. That may be too high, honestly. We'll have to see what the business case analysis that they're coming up with is. But
yeah, you worded that, I think, much better than I did, Eric.
Yeah, and again, then, you know, the time it takes to get a return on that investment in low density areas, right? I mean, you got to get 100% of the population signed up, and even then, you know, again, the dollars you have to charge for the service become high in order to again make the business model work.
Very good points. I can tell you this much: I'm very excited to see these applications when they come in and better understand what this landscape is going to look like and what our possibilities end up being. There's so many unknowns, and I can't wait to start understanding more and seeing what everyone comes up with. We're just about out of time. I think we've got about 1.5 minutes left. Anything else that we want to talk about before we sign off?
I have to drop anyway.
Well, thank you all so much. Appreciate your time today. We'll do it again next month. Take care.